everyone, this is Deviance, week 2. So, this week we are going to be talking about some laws. We're going to be talking about the strain theory, and we are going to be talking a little bit about Massachusetts dropout statistics. Let's do it. All right, so last time we were talking about crime and what it means to be a deviant. And just as a kind of a review, I have some outdated Massachusetts laws, such as it's illegal to go to bed without having a bath or no public boxing matches. Students usually get a kick out of bullets being used as currency. And also, if you have a gorilla, please make sure it's not riding shotgun. Um, these laws were once on the books, and if you were to break them nowadays, people wouldn't even think that you were a deviant. Maybe if it was a public boxing match or bullets as currency. I don't know why you would have a gorilla, but it's just kind of to think about what it means to be criminal and what it means to break the law. So let's talk about the function of deviance. You guys remember Emil Durkheim, and we talk about Emil when we talk about different things with the sociological perspective. And he did a lot of his research on deviance and what it means to have these norms within society and what happens when we break them. So, basically, saying that deviance upholds those norms. So, if we have norms written and we have people who break them, then we have to subcategorize those groups. But it also justifies us having those specific norms if collectively we can agree upon the people who break them as being this other category, these deviants off to the side. It creates those moral boundaries. It brings people together. So we all know something is wrong. Like we were talked about last time or a few weeks ago about how you might be walking down the hallway and there's this somebody coming at you and you're on the right side and they clearly are walking on the right side or on their left side, and it makes it so you have a collision in the hallway. If I brought that up in class, so many people would be like, that's so annoying when people do that, because that little sliver of deviance brings people together. It's kind of like when you're in elementary school and someone breaks the rule and everyone's like, yeah, you tell on them, you tattletale, where being a tattletale isn't always necessarily a good thing. Sometimes it brings people together and rallies around. Also, deviance can encourage social change. So think about the civil rights movement and like civil disobedience, or Gandhi and civil disobedience, and thinking about breaking laws with purpose. So you're doing something in order to make a change. You're sitting in a place you're not supposed to be. You are acting in a way you're not supposed to be, not necessarily violently, but to make a point that whatever the norm is not okay. This is a silly story, but my mom always talked about how when she was at Framingham State back in the early 1970s, they had a sit-in the girls' bathroom about the quality of their toilet paper because it was like really poor. She equated it to like tissue paper that you would use in a gift, and it came in like these little tiny pop-up single sheets. And she said that after all the girls on campus did the sit-ins in their hall bathrooms, they got finally like 2-ply roll toilet paper. So again, just creating that social change. All right, so let's get into Merton's strain theory. This is a huge part of deviance. And if we were in class, I would have us watching movies and analyzing these different personality types, but because we're remote, we just don't have the time. So the strain theory is this idea that certain populations are given lack of access to wealth and opportunity. So the lack of access to these opportunities leads young people to a life of crime, that there's no other option other than theft, the sale of drugs, and other street crime. And there's all kinds of different studies, sociological studies, political science studies about demographics and how people get trapped in neighborhoods in this cycle of poverty. And you might think, well, it's really expensive to live in cities, so I don't understand what you're talking about. Well, I'm not just talking about cities themselves, but I'm talking about how prices of houses end up being set at a certain level because of the people who live there. So if I were to buy a house in Attleboro, it's a lot cheaper than buying a house in Norton. And it's actually a lot cheaper to live in Norton than it is to live in Mansfield or Sharon or Westwood. And that is not a mistake. They basically make it so that if you make less money, towns and cities set the prices of their homes collectively through property taxes and through development at a certain level to make it so certain populations are iced out. Um, so that's why sometimes it's way more expensive to buy a really big old house in Attleboro than it is in other places. And that's all linked to the strain theory. You might listen to rap music and be like, this is what they're talking about. This is a beautiful little quote from the 50 Cent about having to be stuck in this cycle of poverty that like nothing ever changes in the hood and you wish you could get away from it, but you know, you get suckered in. Some of you guys stated that you've been watching On My Block in your Netflix recommendations, and that show really is about this cycle of poverty that sometimes people do feel trapped. All right, according to Merton, there's four different types of deviance. There's the innovator who is looking to make money. So street crime, gang crime, selling drugs, prostitution. Innovation is all about making money. You don't innovate if you just start killing people, that's something else. Innovators, like I said, are making dollars. There's rituals. So there's one that's sort of missing on here, which is the conventional, which is like the regular person. So ritualism typically is somebody who is reformed by society. They are returning to conventional ways of earning wealth. They are trying to conform to society, but typically ritualists have a rap sheet. They are re-entering society. Retreatism. So retreatism is somebody who is dropping out of school. They are dropping out of society. They have resorted to the use of drugs and alcohol. Retreatists are also people who hoard. So hoarding, not just like grocery store toilet paper 2020 hoarding, but I'm talking about hoarding mental illness hoarding, where you can't see out of the windows, like refusal to throw out trash, things like that. Homelessness is also a form of retreatism. So you are abandoning society in the sense that you do not conform to a living space. And retreatism, a lot of times, is medically characterized. So retreatists aren't like typically knowingly breaking laws, they're retreating from society. And again, it's part of that medicalization process of renaming deviant behaviors. And the last one is rebellion. I know it says going above the norm here, and you're like, what does that even mean? So rebels typically are doing things that are dangerous for society and have no monetary incentive. So yes, sometimes people who like murder for hire plots, get paid, or sometimes people kill people for money. And anyone who kills is a rebel, going above the norm. Killing people is above that line. But rebels sometimes do things just because. So, like a serial killer or an arsonist or a trespasser, like you're just doing it to break the norm, not necessarily because you're getting something out of it. So, like a pedophile would be a rebel, things like that. So, it's like more extreme. So Merton characterized, and then again, there's the conformist personality, the conventionalist, which would just be like normal people living their everyday life, like me. So other sociologists, because the strain theory has been around for a while, examine this theory, and they basically said that there's three different types of delinquent subcultures. You're either a criminal, you're either doing conflict, which is like not necessarily a criminal activity, but you're trying to make change within society, for better or for worse. And then there's the retreatist. So that would be like that medicalized population where it's a mental illness and you're retreating from society and you need reform in the sense of psychiatric help and other support systems, opposed to just criminal behavior, which is cut and dry, like you broke the law, here's the result. Cohen suggested that delinquency is most pronounced in lower class youths because they have the least access to opportunity. So, without educational opportunities, you're more likely to become a delinquent. You're more likely to join a gang if you don't have opportunity to wealth when you're younger because you don't think about your future when you're young, and B, you don't have the means to get to the next level. You may not be able to get a loan to go to college. You may not have the grades to get into college. The support system isn't there. So young people are more likely to turn to these type of behaviors. So we're going to look really quickly at some Massachusetts dropout statistics. So they haven't released last year's data yet, but 5,500 students or thereabout dropped out of school last year in Massachusetts, and most of these students are classified as low income. When you drop out, that is wrong. That number, it's supposed to say that. But mostly students who drop out, they have a survey, don't really have a plan. I mean, it's a little bit harder to join the military nowadays because a lot of the branches are requiring a regular high school diploma and not a GED. So some people are taking the GED, some are going to Job Corps, which is a GED job training program. Most dropouts are male. And in Massachusetts specifically, a lot of the dropouts are Hispanic or of Hispanic origin. So that speaks to populations of people. It could be where they live, it could be the support system granted by the state and their homes and so many other things, but interesting to look at. So a lot of students too are considered students with disabilities who have IEPs or 504s. A lot of them are ELL, touching back to different populations. And like we said, a lot of them are considered low income. It doesn't mean that kids from wealthy school districts or kids that are wealthy don't drop out. Obviously, that is something that happens. It's life. But a large percentage of the population is male and low income. One thing I always find to be interesting is that you would think like most kids drop out in their senior year, but it's actually just slightly higher in the senior year than it is in the other grades. So, of all the dropouts, it's pretty even. And that again has many factors. Different things hit at different times too. Kids dropping out to enter the job force, to take care of loved ones, pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is specifically Norton data. So Norton had a 3.6% dropout rate, which is a bit higher than it had been, but it's only 8 students of the 738 that attended in that school year. Schools like Attleboro and Taunton typically have pretty comparable dropout rates to Norton, and that's because they have the infrastructure to support students. So they have night school programs or part day programs, and that gives those extra supports where those students don't drop out. They just choose a different avenue. Where in Norton, we don't really have that. So students they don't think it's an option to like attend a night school program at a different high school because they do have to pay out of pocket for it. So some students just choose to drop out opposed to entering a different type of high school program. Usually wealthier communities have lower dropout rates. So you can see there, Dover Shore Warren had like 1 student, Westwood had 0. And again, that comes with like family support, community support, and things that fluctuate depending on how many impoverished students you have and families. So unemployment rates are highest among teens, and petty crime rates are highest among teens, which is not surprising. So really quick, basically, society blames people and implies that everybody has the same set of rules, and those who break the rules will be deviant. It puts an undue attention on the behavior of the poor because without opportunity, people are more likely to commit crime. So it's about integrating opportunity to those places and evening the playing field. And by doing that, people would be able to subscribe more to those norms. So this is your activity for the week. There's a full out description of it. Running out of time. Gotta go. Have a good week. Goodbye.